Hey guys, welcome back to Boring History to Sleep. Tonight we drift gently into a mystery wrapped in ocean mist and whispering tides, the story of a man found dead on a beach with no name, no story, and a cryptic piece of paper tucked in his pocket. Picture a tranquil seaside morning in Australia, 1948, where the sun rises over the quiet sands of Somerton Beach, and instead of the usual joggers and fishermen, a mystery waits silently for decades to unfold. You probably won't survive this with all the questions it throws at you, but the gentle hum of the waves might help ease your restless mind as we meander through this odd tale. Before you settle in, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe, only if you really appreciate the content I share. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where in the world you're falling asleep tonight. Alright, time to lower the lights, maybe a fan on for that quiet background hum, and together we'll settle into tonight's adventure. It's just after dawn on December 1st, 1948, when a man strolls along Somerton Beach in Adelaide, South Australia. The morning air is crisp, the sand cool beneath his feet. This man, Norman Leslie Broom, a local who enjoys early walks, notices something strange about a figure lying slumped against the seawall. At first glance, it looks like a man asleep or passed out, but as Broom gets closer, unease creeps in. The figure isn't moving. Closer still, and it's clear. This man is dead. The corpse is that of a man in his mid-40s, clean-shaven, dressed in a neat gray suit, a tie tucked under a shirt with no visible stains. The face is calm, almost peaceful, with eyes closed gently as if resting. No signs of violence or struggle. The only odd detail is the man's posture. He's slumped against the seawall, legs stretched out as if he simply gave up and let the world slide away. No one on the beach recognizes him, and his body carries no identification. It's the start of a mystery that soon captures the imagination of the whole nation. The police arrive to find a baffling scene. The man's clothes are impeccably tailored but completely devoid of labels. His shoes are polished to a shine, and the only personal effects are a cigarette pack without branding and a half-empty packet of juicy fruit gum. His watch has stopped at 6:12. What happened to this man? How did he end up here, alone and nameless? This case would soon become famous as the Tamam Shud case, named after the mysterious scrap of paper found later. But for now, all they have is a quiet beach and a man who seems to have stepped out of nowhere and into a story with no ending. The historical fact to tuck away here: the Somerton man was found on a Tuesday morning, December 1st, 1948. Post-Webubu, Australia was still adjusting to peace and change, making this strange death even more unsettling in a world craving normalcy. And here's a quirky tidbit to lull your mind. In 1948, the average Australian paid about 8 shillings for a cinema ticket, and the mysterious man was reportedly seen purchasing a train ticket before vanishing, though whether he ever boarded remains an open question. Historians still argue whether this man died by natural causes, foul play, or something far stranger. Let your eyelids grow heavy with the image of the tide gently washing over the sand near that cold, silent body, still and waiting for a story to be told. The police had a mystery in their hands, but no easy way to solve it. The man on Somerton Beach carried no ID, no wallet, no passport, nothing that would hint at who he was or where he came from. It's like he had been erased from the world's records, a ghost in a suit. What the investigators did find, though, was peculiar in its own right. His clothes were immaculate. The gray suit was tailored, the kind that suggested someone cared about appearances, maybe someone with a certain status or a job that required sharp dress. But when the officers inspected closer, they discovered something strange. All the labels had been carefully cut out. Shirts, trousers, even his underwear bore no identifying marks. This was no accident. Someone wanted to ensure that no one could trace the origin of his clothing. Imagine the effort it took in 1948, long before online shopping, to tailor a suit, buy matching clothes, and then meticulously remove all brand tags. It felt like a puzzle piece deliberately erased. His shoes, polished to a mirror shine, were unbranded as well, yet clearly well made, possibly Italian or English. There was no dust on the soles to indicate he had recently traveled a great distance on foot. Perhaps he arrived by car or train, yet no witnesses came forward to say they had seen him. The cigarette pack in his jacket pocket was another odd detail. It was an Australian brand called Capstan, but the packaging had been sliced open and resealed in a manner that puzzled tobacco experts at the time. The man's teeth showed signs of regular smoking, but no evidence of tobacco tar stains beyond the usual. His gum, yes, gum, was a half-empty packet of juicy fruit, a mundane detail, but it stuck out in a case otherwise full of mysteries. Also missing was a watch chain which some speculate could have held a pocket watch, now gone, and his tie was hastily knotted, with no tie clip or accessory. The entire ensemble was neat, but there was a faint odor of antiseptic, like the smell of hospital or chemist's shops, a sensory clue that would haunt the investigation. Here's your historical nugget. Post-war rationing in Australia was still winding down, and tailored clothing was considered a luxury. The man's attire suggested he either had means or someone had taken care of him, yet no one knew who. Now for a quirky little twist. Police noted that the man's shoes showed slight wear, but his soles were unusually soft, possibly from wearing insoles made from a type of cork or felt, common among soldiers returning from war. Was this a war veteran, or just someone copying this style? This absence of labels and personal marks sparked endless speculation. Was the man a spy wiping clean all traces to avoid detection? Was he a traveler who discarded labels to hide his origin? Or was it something more mundane but equally tragic? Historians still argue whether this removal of identity was premeditated self-erasure or a peculiar quirk of the deceased's wardrobe choices. The missing identity set the stage for a case where every clue felt like a ghostly whisper, guiding but never revealing. A few days after the body's discovery, a breakthrough emerged, though it was hardly the answer anyone was hoping for. The mystery deepened when a train station locker, located some distance from Somerton Beach, was linked to the case. The locker held a brown suitcase carefully placed there and forgotten by time, left behind in an unattended corner of the station. It would be this suitcase that carried with it a set of clues, leading investigators into even murkier waters. Inside the suitcase, the police found several more peculiar items. First, a selection of neatly pressed clothes, items just like those the man had been wearing. Everything was clean, almost obsessively so. It was as if the suitcase was ready to be used for some sort of trip, except the man hadn't been seen leaving the station or boarding any trains. They also found personal effects that seemed both ordinary and unusual. There were toothbrushes and shaving kits, practical items suggesting he hadn't planned to stay at Somerton Beach for long. But in among these were strange objects. A pair of foreign coins, not Australian, but from the United States and New Zealand, leading many to speculate that the man might have traveled from abroad. Interestingly, none of the items in the suitcase seemed to belong to the same person. It was almost as if this suitcase was a collection of leftover belongings, as if they had been gathered hastily by someone who didn't plan on returning. There were also articles of clothing with marks of wear, but again, no identifying labels. Even more confusing, no one had seen this suitcase being placed in the locker, and it was as though the man's entire existence had been scrubbed clean. The case had been left in such a way that the police couldn't trace it back to any store or supplier, further compounding the mystery. Who left it there, and why was it so meticulously packed with clothing, items, and no identification? It was almost as though this suitcase, like the man, had come from nowhere. Historically, post-war Australia had a shortage of luxury goods, and new clothes were often custom-made or imported. Finding such a perfectly neat selection of items in the suitcase seemed out of place. It suggested wealth, or at least some means, yet no one could find any leads connecting these items to anyone in the country. A quirky little tidbit to smooth over your thoughts. It's believed that the suitcase's impeccable condition might have been intended to keep the contents hidden from prying eyes. But then, why the heavy emphasis on neatness? Was this a carefully planned disappearance or just the strange happenstance of a well-to-do traveler? Some say the man in the suit and his contents may have been preparing to vanish, to start anew far from Australia. But why leave the suitcase and vanish without a trace? It's a question that lingers in the shadows. Historians still argue whether this suitcase, as pristine as it was, held the clues to an elaborate cover-up, or if it was the accidental remnants of a strange but ordinary traveler. As we move deeper into the fog of uncertainty, remember, there is no such thing as a perfect mystery without 1,000 different answers, and this one is no exception. The more investigators dug into the suitcase and the man's mysterious circumstances, the stranger the case became. Just when it seemed like the investigation couldn't become any more bizarre, a tiny scrap of paper was discovered inside the man's pocket, seemingly insignificant, but in reality, this tiny slip would throw the entire case into a whirlwind of cryptic meanings and dead-end theories. This wasn't just any scrap of paper, though. It was a small, crumpled piece roughly 2 inches by 3 inches, and it had been tucked into a hidden pocket inside the man's trousers. When police unfolded it, they found 2 words, printed in capital letters, that were about to set the course for a decades-long investigation. Tamam Shud. What could these 2 words possibly mean? The phrase, taken from Persian poetry, translates to ended or finished, often implying finality or completion. The only problem? These words were an enigma in the context of the death. Was this a message left for someone? Was it a clue? Or perhaps it was simply the last act of a man who chose to leave behind a message for whoever might come across his body. The detectives didn't waste time, though. They immediately traced the scrap of paper to its source, a rare 12th century book of Persian poetry, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The book itself was a well-known edition, and one copy in particular had been found at a local public library. But the book was far from an ordinary edition. It was unusual, even in its rarity. Upon further inspection, the authorities discovered that the book had been carefully torn along one of the pages, specifically the page that carried the same 2 words, Tamam Shud. This book had been in circulation for years, and it seemed too coincidental to be linked to the man's death unless there was something more to the story. But the mystery deepened when they realized that a second, more puzzling clue had been hidden within the book itself. In the back of the Rubaiyat, scribbled in pencil, were several lines of letters arranged in what appeared to be a code. The letters didn't form any coherent words, at least not at first glance. They looked like a jumble of random characters, MECVX, and other cryptic strings. The detectives knew immediately that this could be a cipher, a secret code that, if cracked, could potentially reveal the identity of the man or his killer. At this point, the investigation had become a tangled web of codes, missing books, and unanswered questions. What did Tamam Shud mean? Was the man trying to tell someone something before he died? And who had the book with the code in the back? Historically speaking, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam had been popular in the Western world since the late 19th century, particularly after a famous English translation by Edward Fitzgerald made the work a sensation. The fact that this book had somehow become part of the mystery suggested that the man might have been a literary scholar, an academic, or perhaps even someone deliberately selecting a work that could conceal hidden messages. On a quirky note, the Rubaiyat itself has inspired many conspiracy theories over the years. Some people believe that the supposed hidden meanings in Khayyam's work can be interpreted in all kinds of wild ways. Was the man's choice of this particular book and his cryptic notes part of some larger puzzle, a riddle no one had yet cracked? Historians still argue whether the code in the back of the Rubaiyat was meant as a simple clue to the man's identity, or whether it represented something far darker, perhaps even a life that had been intentionally concealed. As you lie back and let the waves of mystery wash over your thoughts, imagine how these pieces of paper, like driftwood lost at sea, only raise more questions the further they drift from the shore. With the discovery of the cryptic Tamam Shud note and the coded message in the Rubaiyat, investigators found themselves facing an even deeper puzzle. The man on Somerton Beach, it seemed, wasn't just some random casualty of the world. No, he was a person with a story, one that was being told through obscure symbols, mysterious references, and perhaps an obscure cultural connection. But what did it all mean? As the authorities delved deeper into the origins of the Rubaiyat and the peculiarities surrounding the Tamam Shud paper, they made another critical connection. The torn page of the book was traced back to a particular copy held at a local library. And this book wasn't just a random copy, it had been checked out by someone just days before the man's body was found on the beach. The library didn't have a name on record for who checked out the book. It was a public borrowing, but the timing was uncanny. Could the man on the beach have borrowed it? Was this book, and the strange message inside it, a deliberate clue, or was it merely a random coincidence? Detectives quickly learned that the Rubaiyat was no ordinary piece of literature to the deceased. In fact, it seemed as though the book was carefully chosen to leave behind a message, not just the Tamam Shud phrase, but also the lines of ciphered letters scrawled in the back. Who had written those letters, and why had they been hidden in such a strange manner? The lines weren't in the book's text, they had been added later, written in pencil, as though someone had been working on a code, or even some sort of final puzzle. One of the strangest developments occurred when police tried to trace the name of the book's borrower. They came across a woman named Jessica Thompson, who, to their surprise, reacted strangely when shown a photo of the Somerton man. She denied any involvement but was clearly unsettled by the question. A faint recognition flickered across her face, though she refused to elaborate. Jessica lived in the area, and authorities later learned she had some connection to the military, though her connection to the dead man, if there was one, remained unclear. Jessica's connection to the case, though subtle, suggested something more than a random encounter. Could she have known the man, or was she hiding something more sinister? Her emotional response, her refusal to talk about him, left investigators wondering if she was a key to the mystery, or if she was simply a frightened woman trying to keep her distance from a crime she couldn't explain. The historical context of this time period in Australia added even more layers of intrigue. The 1940s, fresh on the heels of World War II, were a time of rising tensions between the East and the West. Australia had become involved in the geopolitical struggles of the Cold War, and spies and covert agents were known to be active in the region. The presence of an ancient Persian poem, the cryptic code, and the man's apparent attempt to erase his identity led to some chilling conclusions. Could this man have been involved in espionage? Or was he simply a civilian caught in a bizarre sequence of events? A quirky tidbit to consider. Jessica Thompson, the woman who seemed so hesitant about the Somerton man, later became a figure of intense speculation in the media. In fact, it was speculated by some amateur sleuths that she might have been involved in a romantic entanglement with the man, or that she may have been a participant in espionage herself. However, without concrete evidence, these theories only fueled the fire of mystery. Historians still argue whether Jessica's relationship with the Somerton man was personal, professional, or even conspiratorial, an essential question in solving this mystery. As you drift into a calmer, quieter place, imagine Jessica's guarded silence as she walks away from the questions that never seem to end, leaving behind more pieces for others to uncover. Was she simply a frightened woman, or a key figure in a tale much larger than anyone realized? The story of the man found on Somerton Beach was quickly gaining attention beyond the borders of Australia. As investigators probed deeper into the mysterious case, every clue seemed to lead to more questions, and few of those questions had satisfying answers. But one of the most intriguing threads was the Rubaiyat, and particularly the cipher found inside it. After the discovery of the strange string of letters inside the back cover of the book, many thought that a breakthrough might be just around the corner. The letters, MECVX forms, were clearly not random. They didn't make sense in any known language. Were they a code, a cipher, or just some personal shorthand, a private message that no one else could understand? The investigators, stumped but determined, reached out to cryptographers, code breakers, and anyone who might have insight into the puzzle. They even turned to the public, hoping that someone with a fresh perspective might come across a clue others had missed. The idea that a simple string of letters could hold the key to solving the mystery was tantalizing, and the investigation turned into a race against time. Some cryptographers believed the letters might represent a cipher, something along the lines of a Caesar shift or another simple substitution cipher. Others thought the string of letters might be a reference to a location or even a name. Mimi CV strengths certainly had the feel of a code, but no one could break it. Each theory put forward seemed to lead to another dead end. Was it a random jumble of characters, or was it part of a much bigger, more complex cipher? What made the cipher even more curious was the fact that it appeared to be a standalone clue, not part of any larger body of text. If it was part of a larger code or message, then where were the rest of the letters? Why was it scribbled so hastily, and why in a book of all places? Could this be something as simple as an unremarkable note left behind by someone who didn't expect it to be discovered? Or was this a cryptic message, a final communication from someone involved in a much more significant operation? In the midst of the cryptography discussions, a rather quirky revelation emerged. The letters in the cipher, when interpreted through various decoding methods, seemed to reveal fragments of names and places. Yet each attempt was incomplete, and some of the suggestions felt like more imaginative guesses than anything factual. The string Makuivi forms seemed to spark endless debate but little resolution. Meanwhile, investigators discovered a more perplexing element to the Rubaiyat. The book wasn't just part of a random stack of secondhand books. No, it appeared to have been specifically selected. Not only was the book an unusual addition, but it had also been inscribed with a reference to a local, well-known family. A small personal note had been scrawled inside one of the pages, a personal message, but one that didn't seem to fit the man on the beach. Was this an oversight? A clue hidden in plain sight? The Rubaiyat, a book so steeped in mysticism and mystery, was increasingly being seen as more than just a book. To some, it felt like a literary treasure map leading to a buried story. And as wild as the theories became, they seemed to perpetuate the notion that this death wasn't just a random event, but part of something larger. Could the man on Somerton Beach have been part of some underground operation, someone whose identity was so carefully hidden that even his choice of literature was coded? Historically, the Rubaiyat has been associated with ideas of fate, the transient nature of life, and hidden wisdom. Given that the book had been so deliberately involved in the case, some thought the man on the beach was perhaps trying to communicate something greater about his fate, or the fate of others around him. Was this just an oddly poetic farewell? Or was there something sinister in the man's final mysterious act? Historians still argue whether the cipher was meant to be solved, or whether it was a red herring designed to keep investigators chasing shadows. Now, as you lay there, closing your eyes and letting the enigma of the cipher swirl around you, imagine what it would be like to hold that book yourself, its mysterious pages still holding secrets waiting to be unlocked. Could you be the one to crack the code and reveal the man's identity? While the mystery surrounding the Rubaiyat and its cryptic cipher deepened, the police investigation moved on to another unexpected development. A hidden telephone number, in a turn that felt almost as if the universe was toying with the investigators. A seemingly unrelated detail emerged that would soon fuel even more questions. On the back of the man's Rubaiyat, where the cipher was found, there was a penciled-in phone number. This, too, a clue seemingly left for someone, though the question was, who? The phone number itself led to another layer of confusion. When the police traced the number, it wasn't connected to any person who could be linked directly to the deceased or to anyone of immediate importance. The number belonged to a local woman named Nurse Jessica Thompson. At first, it appeared to be yet another dead end, a coincidence. After all, why would the Somerton man have scribbled her number down? What connection could there possibly be between a nurse in the area and a dead man found on the beach? When police tracked down Jessica Thompson, her reaction to the inquiry was curious to say the least. Her response when shown a picture of the dead man was notably strange. She denied any knowledge of him, but there was a noticeable hesitation. The detective involved later remarked that her reaction seemed off, like someone who knew more than they were letting on but didn't want to admit it. At this point, Jessica Thompson became an enigma in her own right. The question soon became, why did Jessica Thompson, a nurse from the area, have such an emotional, guarded response? She was in her 40s at the time, and her connection to the case grew in complexity when it was revealed she had worked with military personnel in her role. Given the time period, the late 1940s, shortly after World War II ended, many people were involved in highly classified operations, and the specter of espionage loomed large over any investigation like this one. The police attempted to dig deeper into her history, trying to link her more directly to the mysterious man found on the beach. But while Jessica was evasive, she didn't have much to hide. Her records were unremarkable. Her military service didn't suggest anything that would explain her connection to the man on the beach. But one thing was clear, she had a personal reaction to the man's death that raised suspicions. Could she have been involved in some covert operation, perhaps unwittingly? Or was she merely an innocent bystander caught up in something bigger? As investigators probed further into Jessica's background, they discovered an unexpected twist. She had once lived near the area where the Somerton man was found. In fact, some of her neighbors remembered seeing her acting strangely in the days following the discovery of the body. She had even been seen near the beach, though she claimed she hadn't been there on the day of the death. The historical context of the 1940s also adds another layer of complexity to this mystery. Australia, like many nations after World War II, was teeming with covert military operations, secretive intelligence agencies, and former soldiers whose work was clouded in secrecy. The possibility of espionage or some shadowy connection between Jessica Thompson and the dead man became a focal point for many investigators. Was the Somerton man a former soldier, a spy, or a civilian who got caught up in a tangled web of secrecy? Here's an interesting tidbit. Some theorists later speculated that Jessica might have been involved with a man named Carl Webb, another figure whose name appeared in connection with the case. Webb was a Melbourne electrical engineer who had some striking similarities to the description of the Somerton man. While no concrete evidence ever connected Jessica to him, rumors and gossip suggested that they might have shared a personal connection, one which she was desperate to keep hidden. This led to more questions. Was Carl Webb another alias of the Somerton man, or was this yet another red herring in the case? Historians still argue whether Jessica's odd reaction to the inquiry was merely a result of shock and trauma, or if it pointed to something far more sinister, that she knew exactly who the man was and had a hand in some larger scheme. As you let these puzzles drift through your thoughts, think of Jessica Thompson and the weight of the secret she carried. Did she hold the key to unlocking the identity of the man on Somerton Beach? Or was she simply another piece of the mystery, lost in a sea of uncertainty? As the investigation progressed, the name of Jessica Thompson lingered like a shadow, casting doubt and suspicion over everything that had been discovered. But it wasn't just her odd response to the Somerton man's photo that raised eyebrows. Her connection to the case only deepened as more peculiar details came to light. She became more than just a nurse with a mysterious link to an unidentified corpse. She was now at the center of an ever-expanding web of uncertainty. It was soon discovered that Jessica wasn't the only one connected to the case. A few years after the discovery of the body, a man named Robin Thompson came forward with his own story. Robin claimed that he was Jessica's son and that he knew a little more about the case than anyone else. While many dismissed his claims as a strange coincidence, others found his story compelling, especially when he hinted at a connection to an old photograph that Jessica had once kept hidden. Robin said that his mother had never really spoken much about her past, but there were certain moments when she'd become visibly uncomfortable. One of those moments was when the Somerton man's photo had been shown to her. She didn't just act nervous, she seemed to freeze. According to Robin, Jessica had refused to tell him anything about the man on the beach, even though he could tell there was more to the story. The secrecy surrounding her relationship with the unidentified man was, in itself, more intriguing than any of the facts already on record. Now, in hindsight, some believe that Jessica knew the Somerton man's true identity, perhaps even had an intimate relationship with him. But if that were the case, why the secrecy? Why the refusal to acknowledge him? Was she protecting him, or was she protecting herself from something larger, something darker? Adding to the complexity, Robin revealed that his mother had once mentioned a man named Carl Webb. This name, which had been briefly tied to the case before, seemed to hold weight in Jessica's life in a way that no one had expected. Some of the details surrounding this name matched those of the Somerton man's description. Carl Webb was a Melbourne electrical engineer who disappeared from official records just before the body was found on Somerton Beach. He was a man who seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Was this the true identity of the man who had died in such mysterious circumstances? This new lead created an entirely new set of questions. Could the Somerton man have been Carl Webb? And if so, why had he gone to such lengths to conceal his identity? Why had he chosen to carry with him a rubaiyat and a cipher, as well as leave behind a cryptic message that seemed to point directly to a life filled with secrecy? The rubaiyat, with its themes of fate, finality, and hidden meanings, suddenly seemed to take on even more significance. It wasn't just a book of poetry, it was the key to understanding who the Somerton man really was. But the question remained, why had he chosen to leave these cryptic clues, and why had they been so deliberately hidden? Was it a desperate cry for help, or was it something more sinister? A last message meant to disappear as thoroughly as the man himself. As theories about Carl Webb's potential connection to the case spread, it became clear that this mystery was far from over. The idea that the Somerton man could be Webb raised the possibility of a well-constructed cover-up, one designed to ensure that the man's death would never be traced back to him. Was he part of some covert operation? A spy, perhaps? Or was it something simpler, an ordinary man who simply wanted to leave his past behind? Here's a quirky tidbit. Despite being a largely obscure figure, Carl Webb's name became one of the most speculated identities in Australian true crime history. While police never found concrete evidence linking Webb to the dead man, his name kept resurfacing, as if it were the key that everyone was looking for, but no one could quite unlock. Historians still argue whether Carl Webb was indeed the Somerton man, or if Webb himself had been a victim of circumstance, linked to a larger conspiracy that no one had yet fully understood. As you let these pieces fall together in your mind, think of the mysterious Jessica, the echoes of Carl Webb's name, and the fateful Rubaiyat, all tangled in a web that, like the waves at Somerton Beach, never quite seems to settle. With the growing suspicion that Carl Webb might be the key to unlocking the Somerton man's identity, the investigation seemed to shift course. As more details were uncovered about Webb, his life, and the strange circumstances surrounding the case, it became clear that this was no ordinary disappearance or death. It felt as though the threads of this puzzle were woven into the fabric of something much larger, something that, even today, eludes full understanding. Carl Webb had been a Melbourne electrical engineer with a background in science and technical work. At first glance, he seemed like an unlikely candidate to be wrapped up in a mystery involving espionage or international intrigue. But as the investigation continued, Webb's life began to look less like the story of a simple engineer and more like the story of a man hiding from something or someone. Webb's name had been linked to the case for years, primarily through the cipher found in the Rubaiyat. In one of the earlier breakthroughs, a few cryptographers had looked at the string of letters MECVCRT and speculated that it might correspond to a name or location. Some believed the code was a clue pointing directly to Webb, though the cipher was far from clear enough to confirm anything. The connection, though tenuous, fueled the theory that the man found on Somerton Beach could, in fact, be Carl Webb, who had faked his own death and vanished under an assumed identity. Webb's background was fascinating in its own right. His engineering work, though not particularly high profile, had connections to the Australian military during World War II. Was it possible that Carl Webb, an engineer with a skill set useful to wartime technology, had been involved in espionage either as a participant or a target? If he had known too much, or had been involved in something covert, the need for him to disappear, to erase all traces of his identity, would make sense. In that light, the meticulously clean clothes, the lack of labels, and the coded message in the Rubaiyat started to seem like part of a larger narrative. Webb's life, however, was not all secrets and shadows. In fact, he was known to have had some family members who could potentially shed light on his whereabouts or behavior. His brother, for example, was questioned by investigators, but his account of Webb's life didn't seem to offer anything particularly relevant to the case. According to his brother, Webb had never expressed any desire to disappear or start anew. This contradiction only added to the complexity of the mystery. If Webb was indeed the Somerton man, why would he go to such extraordinary lengths to erase his identity, especially when his family didn't seem to think he had any reason to run? To add to the intrigue, there were rumors that Webb's marriage had been troubled. Some sources claimed that he had been on the verge of separation from his wife, possibly due to financial troubles or personal issues. Could these domestic difficulties have played a role in his decision to disappear? Or was there a more sinister element at play? If Webb had been involved in some secretive military or governmental operation, then the pressures of that life might have driven him to take drastic measures to vanish. The seemingly insignificant personal details about his life, his relationship troubles, his work in engineering, took on new importance when viewed through the lens of a potential espionage operation. In a quirky twist, some theorists have suggested that Carl Webb might have been involved in some form of post-war espionage, where the true motivation behind his disappearance wasn't just about avoiding personal troubles, but rather something far more dangerous. Perhaps Webb had become embroiled in secretive intelligence operations, working on classified projects for the Australian government, or even foreign agencies. Could the Rubaiyat and the coded message have been his way of communicating with others involved in this shadowy world? Historians still argue whether Carl Webb's disappearance was linked to a government cover-up, or whether he simply staged his death for personal reasons, hiding away in some quiet corner of the world. As you lie back and let your thoughts wander down the pathways of Webb's life and disappearance, think of the way these secrets unfurl slowly, each new layer revealing just enough to keep you wondering, but not enough to truly understand. As the investigation into Carl Webb and the potential espionage connections deepened, the autopsy of the Somerton man provided yet another baffling set of details. The medical findings added to the growing list of strange elements surrounding the case, and as the body was examined more thoroughly, experts couldn't help but notice a series of peculiarities that seemed almost designed to confound the path to the truth. First and foremost, the cause of death was never conclusively determined. Despite extensive medical analysis, the coroner was unable to find any clear signs of trauma. No bruising, no cuts, no broken bones. The man's body showed no visible signs of poisoning either, at least not in the conventional sense. Blood tests revealed nothing out of the ordinary, and there were no traces of common poisons or drugs in his system. However, there was a curious, unexplained absence of certain internal organs in the Somerton man's body. His spleen was unusually small, and the liver showed signs of something far more subtle, perhaps a long-term condition that had gone unnoticed by even the most thorough physicians. The most puzzling discovery was in his stomach. When the autopsy team examined the stomach contents, they found only a small amount of food, nothing extraordinary. But the absence of any toxic substances in the stomach, along with the unexplained organ conditions, led some experts to believe that the Somerton man might have been poisoned with a substance that was rare and difficult to detect. A toxin, perhaps, that disappeared from the body without leaving the typical traces. Some even speculated that the man had been poisoned with a rare, undetectable chemical, one that was favored by intelligence agencies or even secret government operations. It's worth noting that such poisons were not unheard of in the 1940s, especially in espionage circles. During World War II and the early Cold War, various intelligence agencies used specialized poisons to eliminate enemies or silence informants. These poisons were designed to be undetectable by conventional methods, leaving no trace in the blood or tissues. Could the Somerton man have been the victim of a targeted assassination carried out with one of these secretive toxins? A quirky tidbit worth mentioning: some of the poisons used in espionage operations during the Cold War were so sophisticated that even modern forensic techniques struggle to detect them. Imagine a world where a single drop of liquid could end a life, leaving no trace, only an enigma. This idea of a secret weapon lurking in the shadows of history added to the sense of mystery surrounding the case, making it feel as if the answer was deliberately hidden just out of reach. The lack of definitive evidence pointing to the cause of death led some to believe that the man had been poisoned by someone with access to these specialized substances, someone who knew exactly how to leave no evidence behind. Theories about espionage, covert operations, and the possibility that the man had been a spy or had come into contact with spies started to gain more traction. The more the case unraveled, the more it seemed like a story straight out of a Cold War thriller. But the autopsy results didn't just hint at espionage or assassination. They also raised a much more troubling question. Had the Somerton man been deliberately set up to appear as though he had died from something undetectable? Was his death part of a larger scheme to confuse and mislead those investigating his demise? It was as if the entire body was a carefully crafted puzzle, with each clue designed to keep investigators from finding the truth. Historians still argue whether the autopsy findings were indicative of an expertly orchestrated murder, or if they were the result of a tragic but ordinary death, one that, for reasons still unknown, became embroiled in the political chaos of the times. As you lay back, imagine the tension that must have filled the air in the autopsy room, the team poring over the body, searching for answers that never seemed to come. Each incision, each test, felt like a step toward the truth, but with every answer they uncovered, they were met with more questions. As the autopsy failed to reveal any definitive answers about the Somerton man's cause of death, the investigation began to take on an increasingly eerie tone. The notion of poison as the potential cause of death gained traction, especially considering the mystery surrounding the missing organs and the lack of typical forensic evidence. But what really caught the attention of investigators was the suggestion that the man might have been poisoned by a rare, undetectable substance, one that had been used in covert operations during the early Cold War. The idea that the Somerton man might have been a victim of espionage gained weight as the investigation continued. During the post-World War II period, espionage was rampant, with both the United States and the Soviet Union using secret agents and covert methods to gather intelligence. Australia, being part of the British Commonwealth, was also involved in intelligence operations and was seen as a key player in the geopolitical landscape of the Pacific. While there was no concrete evidence pointing to the involvement of spies or foreign agents, the presence of the rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, the coded message, and the unusual nature of the death itself seemed to suggest a connection to espionage. The man's carefully concealed identity, his seemingly intentional disappearance, and the fact that he was found in a location frequented by travelers, all pointed to the possibility that he had been part of a larger operation. In addition, the time period of the late 1940s and early 1950s was one of intense geopolitical rivalry. The Cold War was just beginning to heat up, and many people involved in intelligence work had the skills to disappear without a trace. Could the Somerton man have been someone who had outlived his usefulness in a covert operation? His death staged to make it seem like an accidental or natural event. His seemingly random and methodical erasure from history, coupled with the presence of the mysterious Tamam Shud scrap in the cipher, made many believe that the man had been deliberately erased, a casualty of a secret world no one could fully comprehend. A quirky historical tidbit here is that during the early stages of the Cold War, secret operatives from both sides were known to use very unusual methods to achieve their goals. One popular method for neutralizing enemies was the use of poisons that had no trace in standard medical tests. These poisons were so refined that even modern forensic tests often struggled to detect them. One such poison, believed to be developed by the KGB, was a colorless and odorless substance that could be slipped into food or drink without detection. This idea of a perfect assassination tool, one that left no trace behind, lent the Somerton man's mysterious death an even more sinister tone. Yet the idea of a poison still left a major question unanswered. Why was this man, if he was indeed part of some intelligence operation, left to die alone on a beach in Australia? Was he a defector, someone who had failed in some way, or was he simply someone who had become expendable in a larger game of global politics? These questions remained unanswered, adding layers of intrigue to a case that seemed to grow more convoluted by the day. Historians still argue whether the Somerton man's death was a political assassination carried out by foreign agents, a result of an ill-fated spy operation, or simply a tragic death resulting from a more personal or accidental cause. The truth seems to be hiding just beyond reach, clouded by the complex political world of the 1940s and 1950s. As you drift deeper into thought, picture the silence of that beach again, the waves lapping gently against the shore as the Somerton man's secrets float just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to find the answers buried in the past. With the notion of espionage swirling in the background, the investigation began to shift toward more concrete questions of the Somerton man's identity. Was he truly involved in covert activities, or was his death part of a darker, more personal tragedy? Despite the many theories, the case remained a riddle wrapped in a mystery, one that offered tantalizing clues but never quite gave up its secrets. The decision was made to exhume the body of the Somerton man in 2021, over 70 years after his death. New forensic technologies and advances in DNA testing had emerged, offering investigators a new tool that the original 1948 team could only have dreamed of. If there was any chance of finally solving the mystery, this was the moment. The goal was clear: to extract DNA and compare it with genetic databases in the hope of finding some trace of the man's identity, or at least his family's lineage. As the body was carefully exhumed from the quiet Adelaide cemetery, a new chapter of the story began. DNA testing had advanced dramatically since the 1940s, and for the first time in history, scientists had the potential to extract genetic information from the long-dead man. Forensic specialists carefully collected samples from the man's bones and teeth, and the hope was that they would provide some clue about who he was. The results were not immediate, but when they came, they sparked a new wave of speculation. The DNA samples revealed that the man was of European descent, likely from Western Europe, possibly from the UK or continental Europe. But even with the genetic data, the man's identity remained elusive. No match could be found in the DNA databases. It wasn't surprising, after all. There were millions of people in the world, and even with a hit, it was far from guaranteed that the man's family line would be tracked down. Still, it was the first real breakthrough in the case for decades, and investigators and amateur sleuths alike felt a renewed sense of hope that the mystery could finally be solved. In a quirky aside, it's fascinating to consider how much DNA has revolutionized our understanding of the past. Imagine how much harder this mystery would have been to solve without the ability to trace family lines through genetic data. One of the most remarkable things about DNA testing is its power to connect seemingly unrelated people, sometimes across vast stretches of time. For a brief moment, the Somerton man wasn't just an anonymous corpse. He was a puzzle piece waiting to be put into the larger picture of history. Yet, even with the DNA results in hand, the Somerton man's true identity remained as elusive as ever. No relative came forward to claim him, and no new leads emerged from the data. The question of why he had so thoroughly erased himself from the world only grew more poignant. Was it the cold hand of espionage, or did he simply want to disappear for personal reasons? In the face of so much data, so many clues, the core of the mystery was still buried beneath layers of speculation. Historians still argue whether this DNA breakthrough will eventually lead to the truth, or whether the case will remain an unshakable enigma, tantalizing but never truly resolved. The problem of identity, of who we are and how we choose to be remembered, remains central to the mystery. For the Somerton man, his very identity is the heart of the puzzle. Who was he really, and why did he want to disappear so completely from the world? As you rest tonight, consider the way the world keeps spinning, bringing new technology, new revelations, and new layers to old mysteries. In some ways, the Somerton man's story is timeless. His search for identity is something we all grapple with in our own ways as we navigate the world. Even as the mystery of the Somerton man continues to defy full understanding, public fascination with the case shows no signs of waning. Over the years, the case has grown beyond the confines of cold case investigations and become a cultural phenomenon, one that attracts conspiracy theorists, amateur detectives, and those with a natural hunger for unanswered questions. What makes this case so enduring is the sheer number of unanswered questions, each of which adds a new layer to an already complex web of intrigue. In the years following the exhumation and DNA testing, the case continued to capture the imagination of the public. New theories and ideas about the Somerton man's identity emerged from every corner of the globe. Some theorists suggested that he might have been a Soviet agent, a casualty of the Cold War, an intelligence officer who had gone rogue, or perhaps someone who had become a target for assassination by the Soviet Union or other intelligence organizations. The presence of the Rubaiyat, a book associated with mystical thinking and deep philosophical questions, continued to fuel suspicions of a covert mission gone wrong. In addition to theories about spies, other more bizarre explanations have come forward. Some suggested that the man was the victim of a time travel experiment gone wrong, or that his death was somehow linked to an interdimensional mystery. And of course, there were always those who took to the internet to speculate wildly about everything from aliens to secret societies being involved in his disappearance. The Somerton man case exemplifies a certain kind of mystery that becomes even more compelling with each new theory. It's not just a lack of concrete answers that keeps people interested. It's the open-ended nature of the questions that continue to linger like shadows, beckoning anyone with a curiosity for the unknown to dive deeper. What makes a case like this so endlessly fascinating is the sheer mystery. The fact that it remains unsolved despite decades of investigation, public interest, and the best efforts of experts across the globe. In a quirky twist, one particularly outlandish theory suggests that the case of the Somerton man may have been part of a larger worldwide conspiracy involving psychological warfare experiments, similar to the well-known MKUltra program run by the CIA during the Cold War. According to this theory, the Somerton man was an unwitting subject of a larger government mind control experiment which could explain his mysterious death. While this theory is, of course, purely speculative and lacks any real evidence, It reflects the kind of speculative thinking that surrounds many unsolved mysteries. The more you dig, the more bizarre the theories become. And yet, the case continues to evoke the idea that sometimes the truth may be hidden in plain sight, if only someone could look at the pieces from the right angle. Despite all the strange and outlandish ideas that have been presented over the years, there's always the chance that something completely mundane could eventually break the case wide open. It could be something as simple as a forgotten letter, an old photograph, or an obscure document that suddenly surfaces and provides the final clue needed to unravel the mystery. Historians still argue whether the long-running interest in the case is a testament to our collective obsession with secrets and the unknown, or whether it's just the result of a long-standing lack of answers. Perhaps it's the combination of mystery, tragedy, and the unknowable that keeps people coming back for more, year after year. As you drift off to sleep tonight, let the mystery of the Somerton man linger just out of reach, like a whisper on the wind. Picture his body on the beach, the waves gently rolling over his unclaimed form, while the unanswered questions continue to echo, unanswered and unresolved, in the corridors of time. Despite all the speculation, theories, and modern breakthroughs, there are some aspects of the Somerton man case that remain as impenetrable as the night sky. The mystery continues to captivate people all over the world, from those working tirelessly to decode the cipher to casual onlookers who simply enjoy the puzzle. And as time passes, new theories continue to emerge, some built on the old ones, while others take wild, unexpected turns. One of the most compelling developments in recent years came when researchers and amateur sleuths began focusing on a new angle: the Tamam Shud message and the Rubaiyat itself. While previous investigators had only superficially explored the significance of the book, recent research has shed more light on its possible symbolism. The Rubaiyat is a famous work of Persian poetry by the 11th century mathematician and philosopher Omar Khayyam. The themes of fate, life, death, and the transience of human existence are deeply embedded in the text. The book's message of finality, Tamam Shud, seemed to mirror the man's own end, and some now theorize that his choice of this book was deliberate, not just a random selection, but a final statement about the nature of his life and death. This line of thought led to another intriguing possibility, that the man might have been a deeply philosophical person, someone who saw his own death coming long before it arrived. The Rubaiyat contains several stanzas that suggest a fatalistic outlook, with references to the inevitability of death, the impermanence of life, and the futility of trying to escape one's destiny. Could the Somerton man have been someone who had accepted his fate? Was the book and the cryptic Tamam Shud simply his final, resigned acceptance of death? One particularly poignant interpretation of the case argues that the man's choice to leave behind such a deeply symbolic text, coupled with his apparent desire to erase his identity, speaks to a life filled with unanswered questions. Perhaps, as some have speculated, the Somerton man was not just a victim of espionage, but someone who had reached the end of a long and painful journey, a journey that led him to the remote beach in Adelaide, where he finally chose to end it all. This theory would make the Rubaiyat his final philosophical statement, a message not just about his death, but about life itself. A quirky fact about the Rubaiyat is that, over the years, it's been cited in countless mysteries, from cryptic murders to strange disappearances. The book, in its various translations, has had a way of popping up in the oddest of places, often accompanying someone who is about to vanish or whose death would remain unexplained for years to come. The theme of Tamam Shud, ended, had somehow become a symbol for unsolved mysteries, and the Somerton man's case had become one of its most well-known examples. However, despite these deeper philosophical readings of the case, the more likely explanation remains tangled in the shadows of the Cold War. Could the Somerton man have been a defector, a spy caught in the crosshairs of a larger international game? Or was his involvement in intelligence work more personal, perhaps linked to an operation or mission gone wrong? As the years go on, there is a lingering sense that the truth may never surface, no matter how many theories are put forward or new technological advancements emerge. Historians still argue whether the Somerton man's choice of the Rubaiyat and the Tamam Shud message was an artistic and philosophical gesture, a final statement about the human condition, or if it was something far darker, an encrypted message left behind for someone who was never meant to understand it. As you relax into your thoughts tonight, Think of the man lying in the sand, the weight of his choices, the symbolism in the book that was his last connection to the world, and let the waves of mystery settle around you as you drift into the quiet dark, where questions like these never truly fade. As the years continued to pass without a clear resolution, the fascination with the Somerton Man case only grew. The public's thirst for answers never quite quenched, with enthusiasts, amateur sleuths, and even professional investigators continuing to dig deeper into the case. The case had taken on a life of its own, an enduring riddle that captured the imaginations of countless individuals across generations. But despite all the effort, the truth seemed just out of reach, forever teasing the world with its many layers of uncertainty. One of the ongoing challenges in solving the Somerton Man mystery has been the lack of concrete evidence. Though the case is often framed in the context of Cold War espionage, there is still no hard proof linking the Somerton Man to intelligence agencies or any covert operation. The lack of identification and the obscure nature of the clues suggests that the man could have been a foreign agent or a victim of a political or personal vendetta, but no one has ever been able to definitively prove this. As the years went on, investigators started to consider the possibility that the man might simply have been a victim of circumstances, perhaps a man who had become embroiled in an event much larger than himself and paid the price. In 2017, another development emerged that added an unexpected twist to the case. A team of genealogists working independently of law enforcement began using DNA testing to search for relatives of the Somerton Man. By tracing genetic connections through distant relatives, they hoped to uncover the man's true identity. The genealogists, using the burgeoning field of genetic genealogy, were able to identify the man's relatives in the United States, people who had no idea that they were connected to the mysterious death on Somerton Beach. For the first time in decades, it seemed as though a piece of the puzzle might finally be falling into place. The genealogists identified a potential relative of the Somerton Man, someone who had a distant connection to a family line from the United States. While the individual in question did not immediately offer a concrete lead, the discovery of this family connection was a significant breakthrough. It suggested that the Somerton Man had, at some point, been part of a family that had long since been scattered across the world. Whether this new lead would eventually provide a clear path to identifying the man remained to be seen, but it offered hope that the case might be solved, if not through traditional investigative means, then through the modern-day science of genetic tracing. In a quirky twist, this development brought the case into the realm of genealogical enthusiasts and amateur detectives, many of whom had been captivated by the mystery for years. The combination of cutting-edge technology and the widespread public interest in the case gave rise to a new generation of sleuths, people with access to genetic databases and the tools to sift through public records, hoping to uncover new clues and possibly unravel the decades-old mystery. But despite the breakthrough, many questions remained. Who was the Somerton Man really? Was he a spy, a defector, or simply a man whose life had been marred by tragedy? Even with the promise of genetic genealogy, the case continues to be filled with as many uncertainties as ever. For every clue that's uncovered, another mystery emerges in its place, keeping the puzzle intact. The more the investigation progresses, the more we come to understand that some mysteries are like sand slipping through our fingers, elusive, stubborn, and almost impossible to fully grasp. Historians still argue whether this genetic breakthrough will ultimately lead to the truth, or whether the case will remain just as inscrutable as it was when the man's body was first discovered on Somerton Beach. Will it ever be possible to fully unravel the man's identity and the circumstances of his death? Or will the answers continue to be locked in time, forever out of reach? As you settle in, think of the tangled threads of this mystery. The man with no name, the haunting rubaiyat, the cryptic cipher, and the mysterious legacy that continues to echo through time. And as you let the sound of the waves fade into your mind, let yourself drift into that quiet space where even the most unsolvable puzzles seem a little more at peace. Despite the breakthrough in genetic testing, the mystery surrounding the Somerton Man's identity remains far from solved. With new technology offering the promise of answers, the investigation into his past took a major leap forward, but the final pieces of the puzzle continue to resist discovery. For every lead that presents itself, another twist emerges, one that keeps the case suspended in the realms of speculation and intrigue. The most recent developments, such as the genetic genealogy breakthrough in 2017, brought new hopes that the mystery could finally be cracked. As genealogists linked the Somerton man to a distant family member in the United States, it seemed for a moment that the puzzle was finally being solved. This distant relative, once identified, became a beacon of hope for researchers. Could this family line hold the key to unraveling the mystery of the Somerton man's identity? Or was it simply another piece of the puzzle that would lead to more questions? What made the genetic genealogy discovery so intriguing was the sense that this new avenue of research could eventually provide definitive answers. The ability to trace family lines and connect distant relatives was a powerful tool that had already proven successful in other high-profile cases, including the identification of long unidentified individuals from decades earlier. It's not just about solving the case. It's about putting a name to a face, understanding the man's life, and discovering the true story behind the mysterious circumstances of his death. For the first time in a long time, it felt as though the truth was within reach. But even as the DNA testing progressed, new uncertainties arose. The connection between the Somerton man and his distant relative was intriguing, but it raised further questions. Was this relative truly connected to the Somerton man, or had they simply shared a distant family line, with no real connection to the events surrounding his death? The challenge of tracing a person's lineage through genetic data is not an exact science, and while it provided clues, it also opened up the possibility of false leads. For every small piece of data, there was a chance that it was part of a larger, more complicated web that had yet to be fully understood. One quirky aspect of this continued investigation is how modern DNA testing has brought new life to old cases like this one. Imagine the man who died on Somerton Beach in 1948, never even knowing that, decades later, geneticists with access to powerful tools would be piecing together his identity with little more than a strand of hair or a bone fragment. It's a strange and almost surreal thought that a piece of DNA from long ago could offer so many insights and spark such an intense desire to solve the puzzle. Still, as much as DNA testing and modern technology have brought the case to the forefront of the public's mind, it has also emphasized the many unknowns. What was the Somerton man's true purpose? Was he a spy, a defector, or was his death simply a tragic accident or the result of personal misfortune? It's easy to get lost in the endless possibilities, each theory leading to another twist or dead end as the investigators chase a truth that may never fully materialize. As we move further away from the initial discovery of the body on that quiet beach, the story of the Somerton man takes on new layers of mystery. With each new technological advance, the case remains as enigmatic as ever. Even the most recent advancements in forensic science have yet to crack the code and provide a definitive answer about the man's identity and his death. While the case is no longer as active as it once was, the public's fascination with it continues to endure, with many still hoping that one day, someone will finally solve the riddle. Historians still argue whether modern technology will finally unravel the Somerton man's identity, or whether, like so many unsolved mysteries, it will continue to be one of those cases that never quite reaches a conclusion, its questions eternally suspended in time. As you sink deeper into the quiet of the night, picture the waves once again washing over the sand, the mystery still unresolved, yet somehow, in its unanswered nature, a story that never truly ends. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to stay just that way, endless questions that can never be fully solved, leaving only the lingering traces of their existence. Despite the numerous breakthroughs, theories, and tantalizing leads, the identity of the Somerton man continues to be as elusive as ever. The case, which began as a straightforward, though mysterious, discovery on a quiet beach in Adelaide, has become one of the most intriguing cold cases in history. But after more than 70 years of investigation, it seems that the man's true identity may never be known. The mystery surrounding his death, his apparent erasure from the world, and the absence of solid answers has ensured that the Somerton man case remains one of the most talked about unsolved mysteries. By now, the mystery has outlived its origin. It's become a piece of public folklore, with amateur sleuths, investigators, and conspiracy theorists continuing to speculate about the man's background. The public's fascination is fueled by the fact that, Despite all the investigative work, no one has ever been able to definitively identify the Somerton Man, leaving room for endless theories and speculation. One of the most prominent theories surrounding the Somerton Man is that he may have been a spy, or at least involved in espionage. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, the torn scrap of paper with the words Tamam Shud, and the coded message all suggest that there could have been a hidden agenda behind his death. The Cold War was in full swing when the Somerton Man died, and spies from both the East and the West were known to be active in Australia. The fact that the man's identity was erased so completely, coupled with the mysterious clues he left behind, has made it tempting to assume that he was involved in some sort of covert operation. But as time has gone on, it's become clear that this theory is just one possibility among many. The man could have been an ordinary person, caught up in circumstances beyond his control, or perhaps someone who had simply chosen to disappear for personal reasons. The complexity of the case lies in the number of potential answers that could fit the evidence. Was the Somerton Man an intelligence officer, a victim of a political assassination, a failed defector, or simply a man who was trying to leave his past behind? One of the theories that has gained some traction in recent years is that the Somerton Man may have been a victim of an accident or a crime of passion. Some have suggested that he may have been the victim of a botched hit or a dispute with someone close to him, which led to his mysterious death. In this theory, the man's identity was erased in an effort to cover up the true nature of his death. However, there is little to support this idea beyond speculation, and it remains one of the many theories that lacks definitive evidence. Meanwhile, the case continues to inspire books, documentaries, and endless articles, keeping it alive in the public consciousness. Some people are convinced that the truth will eventually emerge, while others believe that the mystery will remain unsolved forever. But what remains undeniable is the fascination with the case. Whether it's the book, the cipher, the Tamam Shud note, or the mystery of the man's disappearance, there is something about the case that draws people in, something that makes it impossible to look away. Historians still argue whether this case will ever be solved definitively, or whether it will remain an open mystery, with theories constantly evolving as new information and technologies come into play. It's a mystery that demands attention, even as it resists any resolution. As you lay in your bed tonight, imagine the man on the beach again. Picture the waves, the cool air, the calm surroundings of Somerton Beach, where the mystery of the Somerton Man was born, and where it may one day, hopefully, finally be solved. Or perhaps, like so many other unsolved mysteries, it will remain suspended. As the decades roll on and the years continue to pass since that fateful day on Somerton Beach, the mystery of the Somerton Man feels less like an unsolved case and more like an enduring symbol of the unknown. The absence of clear answers has only added to the enigma. Theories continue to proliferate, and new pieces of information surface, often raising more questions than they answer. What makes this case so captivating is that, despite everything, despite all the advances in technology, the theories, the code breaking, and the expert analyses, the true identity of the Somerton Man remains one of history's most elusive secrets. One theory that has garnered attention in recent years is the possibility that the Somerton Man's death was not accidental, nor was it the result of espionage. Instead, some have suggested that he may have been a victim of a personal vendetta, a private matter that became entangled in the larger web of mystery surrounding his final moments. The idea that he could have been involved in a complicated personal situation, one that led to his untimely death, remains a plausible explanation, albeit one that hasn't been proven. Some have posited that the man could have been a soldier or a wartime spy who was simply caught up in a personal conflict. The idea that he may have been involved in a secret affair, a military operation, or a hidden life has been debated by armchair detectives. Could it be that the Somerton Man's death was part of a tale of betrayal? A conflict that escalated and led to his tragic demise. Others have pointed to the absence of key evidence as a potential clue itself. Why would someone go to such great lengths to erase the man's identity, to remove every trace of who he was? It seems as though whoever was responsible for his disappearance wanted to ensure that no connection to his past would ever surface. Was the Somerton Man being erased for a reason, or was it simply the result of a careless, hasty act? And if it was part of something more sinister, what were the motives behind it? There's also the idea that the man could have been a victim of circumstances, perhaps someone who came to Australia as a migrant or traveler, a person trying to escape something in their past, or someone who just couldn't cope with the pressures of their life. This theory emphasizes the idea that the man could have been an ordinary individual who simply ended up in a situation that spiraled out of control, and that his death, although mysterious, was not part of some grand conspiracy, but rather a tragic accident or decision. What also remains intriguing about the Somerton man's death is the continued fascination with the Rubaiyat, the small book of Persian poetry that has become so intertwined with the case. The book and its message of Tamam Shud, ended, has come to symbolize the mystery itself. It remains unclear whether the Rubaiyat was meant to be a final farewell, a cryptic clue, or simply an artifact of the man's life. Was the book his way of leaving behind a message for someone, or was it just a random object in his possession? The Rubaiyat continues to spark debates, and its meaning remains a point of contention. Some believe the book is central to understanding the man's motives, while others argue that its importance has been overstated, merely another piece of a larger puzzle that, in the end, is not as crucial as some might think. It's a fascinating idea that something as small as a book could carry so much weight in a case like this. It's emblematic of the way small clues can grow larger over time, taking on lives of their own and carrying more significance than originally intended. The Rubaiyat, just a book of poems yet tied to a man whose identity remains hidden, is the perfect symbol for the Somerton man himself, small, enigmatic, and full of untold stories. Historians still argue whether the Rubaiyat truly holds the key to the case, or if it's merely a reflection of the obsession people have with finding meaning in the unknown. Does it point to something profound about the Somerton man's life? Or was it just a random possession left behind without real significance? As you settle in, imagine the quiet expanse of Somerton Beach again, the gentle waves lapping against the shore. The man's body rests there, a symbol of a mystery that refuses to be solved. His story, like the Rubaiyat, will continue to echo through time, with pieces of the puzzle scattered throughout history, waiting for someone to finally fit them together. Or maybe, like so many mysteries, it will remain unsolved, its questions lingering in the air like a distant, unspoken thought. As the years continue to roll by, the legacy of the Somerton man case grows. It has now firmly embedded itself into the public consciousness, captivating the minds of those who are drawn to unsolved mysteries. Even as the investigation progresses with the latest advances in DNA technology and genealogical research, there is a certain haunting quality about the case. The mystery, with its myriad of unanswered questions, seems to transcend time, drawing people from all walks of life into its vortex. What's truly remarkable about the case is that, despite the attention it has garnered over the decades, no one has yet been able to solve it completely. In 2021, the Somerton man's body was once again exhumed to obtain DNA samples. New tools and technology had become available, providing the best hope yet of identifying the man and uncovering the story behind his tragic end. As DNA testing became increasingly sophisticated, the hope was that some conclusive link could finally be made to trace the Somerton man's ancestry. With the sample, researchers were able to trace genetic connections, and distant relatives of the man were identified. While this seemed like a significant step forward, the puzzle remained incomplete. The identification of potential relatives through DNA offered a new path, but it also led to new challenges. These relatives, scattered across the globe, could hold valuable pieces of the puzzle, but no one had been able to directly connect them to the mysterious man found on Somerton Beach. It was as though the man had deliberately erased his past, perhaps for reasons that would never fully make sense to anyone but him. The Somerton man's identity continued to be a mystery, and although progress was being made, it seemed increasingly clear that the final answer would always be elusive. In addition to the latest scientific developments, the case continues to inspire the fresh theories and ideas, many of which become more outlandish with time. Some people continue to theorize that the Somerton man was a spy, possibly even a double agent who had been caught up in the covert political games of the Cold War. Given the timing of the man's death in 1948 and the heightened espionage activity during that time, it's understandable that this theory persists. But while it's a compelling theory, there is no definitive evidence to confirm it. Then, there are the more fantastical theories, many of which stretch the limits of plausibility. Some suggest that the Somerton Man was a victim of a secret government experiment. Others claim he was a time traveler caught out of place, and still others believe he may have been involved in a secret society or even abducted by extraterrestrials. The theories continue to evolve, with each new revelation fueling more questions than answers. While these theories are often dismissed as too outlandish by serious investigators, they do show how the public fascination with the case has morphed over time. The mystery has taken on a life of its own, and now it's as much about the journey of solving the mystery as it is about the mystery itself. It's the very ambiguity that has given the case its power and made it so enduring in popular culture. People from all over the world, through books, articles, documentaries, and online forums, continue to speculate, discuss, and try to piece together the puzzle. The more time that passes, the more theories emerge, and the more uncertain the answer becomes. The theories themselves have become a part of the case's mythos. The Somerton Man has become, in a sense, more than just a man. He is a symbol of the unknown, an embodiment of the mysteries that linger unexplained in the world. This ongoing speculation feeds the mystery, creating an endless loop of curiosity that keeps the case alive in the public mind. Historians still argue whether the mystery will ever be fully solved. Is it even possible to solve a case that has so many conflicting and contradictory clues? Perhaps the search for the truth will never yield a definitive answer, and the case will remain forever suspended between the past and present. As you reflect on the story, think about the Somerton Man himself, a figure whose life has become lost in the fog of time. What was his life like? What choices did he make that led him to the beach on that cold December morning? Was he, as some suggest, a man caught up in the political machinations of a turbulent time? Or was he simply someone trying to disappear, someone who wanted to leave the past behind? The mystery remains tantalizingly out of reach, and with each new piece of evidence, the story of the Somerton Man becomes more layered, more complex, and more compelling. As the years slip by and the case of the Somerton Man persists in the shadows of mystery, the story becomes less about finding concrete answers and more about the journey itself. For those still captivated by the puzzle, it represents something timeless, a reminder that not all questions have simple solutions, and some mysteries, no matter how much we dissect them, remain just beyond our grasp. The case has become a part of Australian history, a tale that will forever be discussed, analyzed, and pondered over long after the names of those involved have faded. Despite the advancements in genetic testing, the discovery of potential relatives, and the constant speculation that arises from each new clue, the identity of the Somerton Man still holds firm. In recent years, new searches for the man's relatives have provided faint hope that one day the case might finally be resolved. But as of yet, the trail remains cold. Each new discovery, whether it's a breakthrough in genetic mapping or a new theory, only seems to add to the enigma. The case has transformed from a simple missing persons investigation into a global phenomenon that continues to captivate those interested in unsolved mysteries. What makes this mystery so compelling? Why, after all these years, does the case continue to evoke curiosity? Perhaps it's the haunting silence of the beach, the sense of isolation that surrounds the man's final moments, or the knowledge that his identity was deliberately erased from the world. In many ways, the Somerton Man embodies the uncertainty and impermanence of life itself. We are all, in a sense, like the Somerton Man, traveling through the world, leaving behind fragments of ourselves, but never quite sure if those fragments will be remembered, or if they will be lost forever. There's also something undeniably powerful in the fact that we still don't know who the man was. In an age where information is abundant and identities are easily traced through social media and technology, the Somerton Man's disappearance is a stark reminder that there are still things we cannot control or understand. The fact that the man was able to disappear so completely is an act of defiance against the modern age of surveillance and constant connectivity. It's a rare glimpse into a time when personal anonymity still existed, and the mysteries of the world were not yet bound by the certainty of digital records and social media profiles. Yet, even as the mystery endures, there are still those who believe that answers are within reach, that the final clue is waiting to be uncovered. Some are convinced that modern forensic techniques will eventually provide the missing link, whether it's a final DNA match or a forgotten document that will tie everything together. Others believe that the case will remain unsolved forever, a timeless riddle that will continue to haunt investigators and armchair detectives alike. Perhaps the case will be solved one day, or perhaps it will remain a permanent fixture in the landscape of unsolved mysteries. But even if we never learn the truth, the case of the Somerton man serves as a reminder of the questions that persist, the stories left untold, and the mysteries that may never be fully understood. It's the kind of mystery that lingers in the back of your mind long after the books have closed and the documentaries have ended. As you drift into sleep tonight, think of the Somerton man, his identity still a ghost in the fog, forever captured by the waves and the winds of Somerton Beach. Think of the questions that surround him, the mysteries that remain unsolved, and the ways in which those mysteries will echo long after we've forgotten to search for the answers. And maybe, just maybe in the silence of the night, you'll find some comfort in the unanswered, in the unknown. As you settle deeper into your bed, the mystery of the Somerton man slowly fades into the quiet night. There are no more clues to chase, no more cryptic messages to decode, just the stillness that follows an unanswered riddle. Sometimes it's the unsolved mysteries that linger longest in our minds, floating in the space between wakefulness and sleep. And perhaps that's the peace we can take from them, a quiet acceptance that not everything needs to be figured out, and some questions, like the man on Somerton Beach, will remain unanswered. Rest now and let the quiet drift you into sleep as the mysteries of the world settle around you, gentle and unresolved. Good night.